All right, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I know it's been a really long time since you guys have heard from me. Um, I just got out from 10 months of operating in the Gaza campaign here with the war that we have been fighting against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, where we have had some of the most horrific attack against the Jewish state, against the Jewish people in our history. And so I have been involved with the military campaigns of the IDF as a reservist, been in basically in almost every part of the Gaza Strip during those operations as far as where the IDF has been conducting our missions. And I'm finally out. I'm finally been released after these many months of fighting and operating and serving my country and serving with my brothers in arms who are married, have kids, have businesses. We've had to put everything aside in order to defend our country. And so essentially, now that I have the time to basically keep you updated with new posts here for the podcast, I'm able to finally really put in um, content and try to keep you posted and updated. And we're going to have more interesting interviews. We have some really great people lined up for you. But for now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on now that like I said, I've had 10 months of combat experience in the Gaza Strip. And that's out of the 11 months that we have been fighting there, by the way, as of this recording. And so my lessons learned from the past 10 months of fighting in Gaza. First of all, I can tell you that for me personally, there's nothing more humiliating, there's nothing more frustrating than putting your life on the line day after day after day, and to get back from your missions, to open up social media and to see what is the world saying about you, and to have people, okay, to have these pundits, okay, that are taking one side or other, right? So one side of the spectrum is obviously going to take the Israeli side. They're going to support the Israel's war against Hamas and to defend itself and all those good things. On the other side, you're going to have those who are sympathizing with the Palestinians, and they're overlooking the fact that the ones who are controlling the Palestinians and the ones who have created this conflict with Israel is Hamas, the terrorist entity that is controlling the Gaza Strip. So basically what's happening is that terrorists are being rewarded for their terrorist activities while holding captive a whole group of people in the Gaza Strip. And the ones who are being demonized are the ones who are trying to liberate those Palestinians, while at the same time we're trying to retrieve our hostages and restore peace and order and safety and security to our civilians living along the Gaza Strip. So it's not that complicated, really. But again, like I said, what I see online is I see two sides of the coin, and which side is right? Which side is telling you the truth? Which side is promoting truth and humanity and all those good things, right? So first of all, when I look at the pundits, okay, the ones that are promoting or standing on the side of the Palestinians, right? They're claiming, there's a few claims that they make. They make some really broad statements that are just, they're void of a historic context. They're void of understanding what is the creation of the state of Israel. In other words, why are Jews living here, right? How did Israel get created, both legally and what have you, and so on, and so they're ignorant of that. And what they'll claim is this: they claim that the Jewish people post World War II because we were battered and beat up from Europe and the Nazis and whatever, and that, and they'll even push that and say, oh, we also exaggerate our suffering. We exaggerate the numbers, and I mean, this is some crazy stuff. Okay, like the claims I've heard these people say, oh, there's no factual research behind the claim that Jews were being operated on. That because this is what we know happened from the Holocaust. Like, we know this has happened, but they say, oh, no, Jewish people make this stuff up. They exaggerate the facts. So they're saying, why would Dr. Mengele, for example, who is known as one of the most horrific doctors in the camps, in the concentration camps, who did and performed some of the most sadistic operations, okay, on twins, on short people, big, people that had defects and that were different, and he had a specific issue, or what do you say, fatuation with the research of twins. If I do this to the one twin, how's the other one going to feel, react, and so on and so forth. So he did some very, very sadistic experiments. Okay, surgeries without anesthesia, without local anesthesia, in the area where he's during the surgery, removing tissues and organs. Okay, on live humans, Jews that were being held in the concentration camps. By the way, not just Jews. He also did the exact same thing on gypsies and other people of interest to him. Okay, so this we know happened. And then you have someone like Candace Owens that gets on national television and goes on these rants, and she says, "Oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to be, canceled, if I say this, they're going to block me on social media." And she drums it up, right? I'm going to get punished if I tell you the facts and the truth behind, this Jewish conspiracy of what they went through in the Holocaust, right? And how they just make up these facts, and she said, and she makes these claims and says, why would anyone waste their resources and all this on doing such, experiments and surgeries and so on. Again, I'm paraphrasing her. You can go look it up yourself and just watch the stuff that she has spoken out about these very things, as she goes on these rants about this conspiracy theory about the Jewish world and this secret cult that the Jews in Europe, that they, these bloodthirsty cult, and I mean, it's crazy, right? She's pushing the libel, okay? The libel that literally led to the Holocaust, that the Germans were peddling from the 1800s. And even before that, of where Jews, take blood to mix in for their matzahs, right? For Passover and so on. That's the Jewish libel, right? She says, but the people were going missing and, this and that. And so this is a bloodthirsty cult, as she calls us. I'm a Jew, by the way. So I'm saying, as she calls us, right? As the collective whole, because she didn't make any differentiation by saying, a certain, cult within the Jewish people, a family or what have you. No. It's the Jews, of Europe that came here, that these forget the exact name she gives us, some whatever. So I researched it for myself because I'm like, I'm very curious. I grew up in Israel. I grew up in the land of Israel for my whole life, surrounded by Jews. And I found it very interesting that how is it that she knows more about my people than I do? How is it that she knows all of these like secret details that apparently just went over my head, right? Like, wait, nobody told me that, hey, guys, why didn't you tell me that I'm part of this secret cult? How come, did you guys leave me out? Like, what's the deal, right? And of course, what I discovered online, because you can find this trash online because it's trash, it's libel, it's anti-Semitic lies. And there's a lot more than what she pointed out, by the way. So if you really want to do a deep dive, you can find some more some more libel and lies against the Jewish people, of how we are about, world dominance, taking over the world, and all this stuff. And these publications, of course, are being uh, published in Arabic for the Arabs living here in this region. And that's part, actually, of why they hate the Jewish people, because the same propaganda and lies they pump into the educational system within the Arab population in the Middle East, mainly here in Israel, in the Palestinian school systems. They really pump these lies and this propaganda that Candace and others. Again, I'm focusing on her, and here's why: because she's supposed to be a conservative, supposedly, right? And before this war broke out, there wasn't, if you listen to anything that Candace had to say on most issues in the United States, and many of them I actually would agree on. Okay, so I agreed on many of the different political issues that were going on in America and so on, things that she would talk about, and I would watch and I'd say, okay, it just goes over your head. You don't see like there's something weird with this woman. Then the war breaks out with Gaza right after Candace has a breakaway from the Daily Wire and that whole hubbub that she had, and of course it blew up the internet, so to speak, and so on and so on and so forth, right? Then all of a sudden she goes from working for a company, right, a media company that is the CEO and the co-CEO are Jewish, and one of the most famous Jews in the world, by the way, known from news interviews and different popular topics in America, and so on and so forth, right? So Ben Shapiro, as everybody, you've heard the name, is a well-known political figure, and this was the person that she worked with, right, for the same publication or media network, if you like. And so this is supposed to be a conservative network that has conservative views and values and things that they talk about, right? And so this is who she worked for, and then had a breaking away. And then before you know it, beforehand, right, because she was on these Jewish forums and was invited to Israel, and she got to visit the old city, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that Candace observed and decided only now to make public was like her findings, right? Because beforehand she didn't say a word. She didn't say a word when she got hotels and accommodations and everything, right? As the guest to these organizations to come and visit and be on different panels and whatever and all that good stuff, right? And so she got to visit the old city. And one of her claims is that the old city is an apartheid city because it's divided up into quarters. So I am going to try to reserve just being superly and overly, how would you say, in your face about how absolutely stupid and ignorant this person is. And I cannot believe that this is the person that millions of people are watching and listening to and believing her opinions on anything. All right. When somebody visits Israel, right, and they go to the old city, and if you had a proper tour of the old city, you would have learned on that tour that the reason why the city is divided into quarters is because that was a process of time of how the city within the past 2,000 years has morphed, developed, and evolved into those four quarters, depending on and with the influence of those that ruled the city previously. So you have the Byzantine period, that's the Christian period, in the 4th century, okay, leading up to the Islamic conquest in the 6th century, 6th, 7th century, right? Then you have, the Ottoman Empire that was ruling up until the British in World War II. The British in World War One took over, and then after that, it basically moved to the hands of the Jordanians post the 48 war. They had occupied the old city for those was it like 19 years until 67, and then after that, okay, is when it ended up back into Jewish hands. So all that to say, you had different ruling powers with religious religious influences and people groups who controlled and took over and ruled the city. And with that time and evolution of all these different periods, you essentially ended up having 4 different quarters: one Jewish quarter, one Muslim quarter, one one Armenian quarter, and one Christian quarter. So these are the 4 quarters of the old city. And I can tell you, as one who has been through the tour guiding course here in Israel during COVID, I have a security expert expertise background. That's my expertise, if you will, as far as professionally as an executive protection professional. That's my profession that I've been working at many years. But I've also been a very much interested in religion and archaeology and history of Israel in specific, and been very much involved with some of the top professors and archaeologists in those fields, and specifically Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, if you like, is for me one of my expertise as a person, as an individual, as a person who has professional expertise in any field. This right here is one of my expertise, and considered to be a person who knows what he's talking about when it comes to Jerusalem. And for me, who has a tour guide background, who has all those interests background that I just told you, if I were to guide you through the old city and to show you the quarters and explain to you and all that, if you to walk away with the idea that Jerusalem represents an apartheid, then you would have to have fallen on your head. Do you understand what I'm saying? The point is real simple. Candace Owens, if you think of her as a credible person to hear or to listen to on any topic, then all I'm saying is, when listening to what she had to say about her experience of visiting the old city as a tourist, an expert, as a tourist, and to publicly smear around the world that Israel is an apartheid country and that Jerusalem is the perfect example of it, not to mention the old city because of the segregation that you have there, then you have to be an absolute moron. Forgive my French, but come on, seriously? You don't understand that the city is divided because of and what of and whatever. And by the way, it doesn't mean that the quarters are in such a way that they're absolute division. Jews go into the Muslim quarter, Muslims go into the Jewish quarter, Christians go into the Muslim quarter, Jewish quarter, etc., and the Armenian and so on. In fact, it's the Armenian quarter that is the most segregated for their own personal reasons, as a minority that lives in the old city and as a minority people group in the world that have been viciously attacked specifically by Muslims in Turkey. Anybody knows about the Armenian genocide, for example. Little history note there for you. Look it up. Get yourself familiarized. These same people group are the ones who actually enclose themselves extra into their quarter of the old city because of fears of being persecuted back in the 1800s and so on. So again, this is just a historic fact. And when if you as an individual are overlooking these historic facts and these things are so obvious to you, and that if a Muslim were to show you through Jerusalem, or a Christian or an Armenian or a Jew independently, you would see from their perspective that this is not a apartheid city. In fact, to my experience of visiting the old city, that is the perfect example of coexistence, is the perfect example of that you can go anywhere freely and you can experience the Islamic culture here and influence and so on and so forth, the Christian the Christian, by the way, like the most holiest Christian sites in the world are there in the Old City, and hence that's why you have those Christian population and quarter, is because that's the area that they put their stamp and have had Christian pilgrims come from all over the world for thousands of years. And to come away with this crazy idea is insane. What it shows me is that the bottom line is there are people out there who have been given a platform and put in front of cameras and interviews on news and what have you, and they are giving misinformation. They're lying to you, and or just giving their bias and their sick views of Jews or Israel or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they're pushing their agenda on you as the viewer or the listener, and you're getting bold-faced lies, mixed information, false information, etc. All this background to tell you, I have served in Gaza, like I said, for what's it been, 10 months. So I've actively served in the Gaza campaign. I've been a part of the military operations, taken part of, and I can tell you as a firsthand experience, one who's been there and has seen and knows what the IDF is doing, that what the lies that you're hearing on the news, on political pundits and what have yous like Candace Owens and crowd, these are two different points of views and perspectives. And if you've been following the podcast, by the way, I've brought on here some of the most renowned and people of expertise in this field to give you their assessment of what has Israel been doing as far as operating in the Gaza Strip in specific, is actually what we mainly talked about. But in general, the war that Israel is conducting here on three fronts. So that's another thing that's not being mentioned. Yes, I've participated in the Gaza campaign, but there's a campaign in Lebanon with the Lebanese threat from Hezbollah, another terrorist group that has taken over and taken hostage a nation, a neighboring nation to Israel. Lebanon used to be a perfect example of, again, coexistence in the Middle East for both Christians, Druze, Muslims, and others that lived in peace. And then in comes in this terrorist group, funded, backed, and strengthened by Iran. And technically, actually, the origins of all of these terror groups, by the way, who have taken hostage the neighboring nations and have terrorized the neighboring nations, are actually the Palestinian terrorist groups, starting with the PLO, okay? Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. So that was founded by Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat, okay, he is not a Palestinian. Yasser Arafat, by the way, is actually Egyptian. And he so happens to be the grandson of the Mufti of Jerusalem, okay, the Islamic Mufti of Jerusalem, who was the one who founded, who spearheaded, who contributed to fueling the Nazi machine of murdering and killing Jews. Okay, so he actually created the Islamic SS unit. Okay, the Muslim SS unit of the German fighting force in World War II. So this is who the relative, okay, of Yasser Arafat is. Okay, so this is his close relative. Yasser Arafat is a native of Egypt. He's Egyptian born. Okay, Arab. So Yasser Arafat, okay, he is the one, the godfather, if you will, the creator of this myth, this creation of the Palestinian people. He took the term that was labeled to this land by the Romans. The Romans are the ones who renamed the district of Judea, of Syria, okay, the greater district of Syria, so it's Syria, Judea, of the Roman Empire. So it included modern day Syria as well, by the way, portions of modern day Syria, and the land of Israel, which was the Judea. Okay, so Judea from Jews, right? Jewish, because of the population that were living here, were those who revolted against the Greek Empire, by the way, right? So I'm giving you a quick. We're jumping all around here, but this is important because the context is everything. All right. If you want to understand why I'm fighting right now in Gaza, you need to understand the backdrop to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. If you don't understand the backdrop, you're going to be lost in the weeds of the misinformation, the news reporting, and all these people who are really ignorant. They don't have this historic background that you're about to get, and this is what it's all about. This is really what it's all about. In any case, back to the Romans. So the Jews revolt against the Greek invasion of Israel. That's why we have the celebration of Hanukkah, because by a miracle we were able to hold off against the Greek control and influence of this land of Judea. The Romans come here, and then it just transfers the ownership and the or not the ownership, but the oversight of this area from the Greek Empire to the Roman Empire, as the Romans took over the Greek Empire. And under the Roman Empire, up until today, after the Jewish revolt and the destruction of the temple in 7 AD, and then 135, the Romans eradicate all zealots that are left, Jewish zealots that are left in the land of Israel, at the time known as Judea, and they do something very, very decisive to erase Jewish history of this area, or Israelite history in specific. They renamed the holy city, Jerusalem, to Aelia Capitolina, and they renamed the land Palestina. The reason why they called it Palestine is a play of words off of Philistine. So who are the Philistines? The Philistines were Greeks. They were Phoenicians. The Phoenician Greeks had a disaster, a volcanic eruption is one assumption. There's many different assumptions. Volcano, they got a disaster, whatever. But basically, they had to flee where they were living in their islands, the Phoenicians, and they moved east. They moved up to Tyre, which is modern-day Lebanon, and they started to take over the coastland and work their way down, and that's how they ended up in Ashkelon, Ashdod, and modern-day Gaza. So these were the Philistines, and they also are not Philistines. That's not people group, right? Because this term, it's important to understand. It's not a people group. It's what the Israelites called these invaders. We called them the invaders because they invaded from the sea. They didn't come from inland. They didn't come from Egypt. They didn't come from Assyria. They didn't come from the neighboring countries when they had invaded. And so they were these outsiders, these foreigners. So we called them invaders. In Hebrew, Polshim, or translated into Plishtim. So so the term Philistine, right, is actually a Hebrew term for invaders. And so the Romans do a play on words, and they call it Palestina. They don't have they didn't use the exact direct enunciation of how you say the Philistines. They called it Palestine. Fair enough, in their language, whatever. And in their minds, they took the sworn enemy of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, and they're like, hey, we're going to call this after those people who at this point didn't even exist in the land anymore. They didn't exist during the Roman conquest of the land and the destruction of the temples and so on, and the expulsion of Jews in the Second Temple period. So these Phoenicians no longer existed here. Their archaeology exists, their stamp in history exists, And that's what I've been, very much interested in and have researched quite extensively. So I can tell you that, their historic stamp is definitely in this land. But Palestinians, no. Fast forward to 1917, the British take over, like I said, Jerusalem and different campaigns in the land of Israel, or at the time, the land of Palestine. Why is it still called Palestine? During the Ottoman period and up till the British period, because the only map that existed throughout all these wars and conquests, the Byzantine period, the Islamic period, the Ottoman period, and all the ones in between, the Seljukim and all those. I'm not going to get into those. There's many other empires or many other groups, but these are just general historic backdrop. No one changed this land. No one made it into their empire. No one made it into their capital city or anything. This land and Jerusalem in specific, which was the capital and the center of the Jewish world, never became of any historic significance to any of those empires, including the last one that ruled here for nearly 500 years, the Ottomans. So during the Ottoman period, they didn't do anything significant with this land. The Islamic golden age, right, of this time, and they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything significant, meaning with Jerusalem. They didn't do anything significant with the land of Palestine at the time. Nothing. Then, if you fast forward to, like I said, 1917, the British take over in World War I. They win a bunch of different campaigns, including the Jerusalem campaign and so on, and they take it over. They take over the Ottoman-controlled area, which became known as the Palestine, the British Mandate of Palestine. So the British Mandate of Palestine is modern-day Jordan and all of Israel, including the Golan Heights, including Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank, including the Gaza Strip. So all of this land mass is what is known as the British Mandate of Palestine. So the British, who control this area, control this mandate, they do not rename it as well. They do not rename this area. So it's the Mandate of Palestine. They don't go back to biblical time, to the Roman time, and say, oh, actually, this was the land of Israel or Judea. Because Jews that were living here, right? Like this is the historic homeland of the Jewish people. And now they make a decision what to do with this land, what to do now that they're the controlling influence here. What are we going to do here? So you have Mark Twain. Mark Twain makes a few interesting quotes. Mark Twain points out and says, this land, he talks about some of the most important areas up in the Jezreel Valley area. He said he would ride his horse for 30 miles, U.S. miles, in any which direction. And he said, this place is so desolate. There are no major cities, no major towns. He said, at best, you would run into some Bedouin encampment, and that's it. So in other words, even so this is before the British take over. So he's pointing out that this place is like nobody cares. And the Ottomans clearly don't care about this area. And the only ones really that care are Christians who talk about in church, because of the biblical context or whatever, they talk about this place, this magical land of Israel, with Jerusalem, the Jerusalem of gold. He's like, but I'm visiting it, and Jerusalem is an armpit. These areas that are significant biblical areas, they're nothing. It's wastelands and all that. So in essence, Mark Twain is basically a prophet who is prophesying about the fact that this land, without the Jewish people in it, no one is able to make anything of this land. Nothing. There's no aspirations. There are no visions and hopes. There's no culture. There's nothing here. And so the British, they examine all of these facts. They examine, who's controlling, who's doing what, etc. And what they found is that after discussing and having a representation of the Jewish community, the Arab community, the Christian community that lived here, and so on. Because yes, there were Jews still living here even after the Roman destruction and so on. You had a Jewish community that continually lived in this land, by the way. That's another thing that people just forget. It's like, oh, the Jews just came from Europe and that's it. No, these are Middle Eastern Jews. They lived and grew up in the land of Israel during this whole period. And so what happens is the British convene in San Remo, Italy in 1920. They convene with the League of Nations. So in other words, all those who were the victors of World War I, and to decide the fate of the British Mandate of Palestine, because each one had a mandate. Each one had, Sykes-Picot and all these different decisions on how to split up the Middle East. The French had their area, the British had their area, and so on. And so essentially, this is what created the map of the future of the Middle East. It's what created Iraq. It's what created modern-day Jordan and Syria and Lebanon. And in other words, all these countries, these Arab countries, were created and borders were drawn post World War I and the San Remo convention, where they met, the San Remo conference, where they met and deemed the future of all these future to be countries. Because before that, they did not have independent countries and so on. The Middle East, and especially the Arab world, are tribal, and they live a lot more like Bedouins, like what modern day Bedouins are like. That's more how they are. They roam where their flocks need to graze and so on and so forth, and based off of a lot of different things, trade and so on and so forth. So this was like the cultural backdrop of how things used to be. And then post World War I, you had the Industrial Revolution, and you had trains, and you had this, and you had that, and modern, electricity and water coming from a faucet in your home and not from the well, and all these different things all came to a head here with all these big major decisions. So it's within that 200-year period of the 1800s, and a lot of revolutionary things that took place here in the land of Israel, right? Or at the time, like I said, known as Palestine. And so in 1920, the official decision was made that this is the Jewish homeland, including modern day Jordan. All of the mandate of Palestine, the British mandate of Palestine, all of it was to be the Jewish homeland. That was the decision. Then what happened is the British went back on their agreement. They handed over all of Jordan, which is over 70% of what was supposed to be the Jewish homeland, right, for Jews. So they handed over to a minority group known as the Hashemites, and they put in control of what was known as Transjordan. They put in control the Hashemite tribe or family to rule over all of Jordan. Major mistake there, because they were less than 20% of the population. Until today, they're about 20% now, maybe give or take 20 plus percent of modern day Jordan, and they rule Jordan with an iron fist, and they mistreat all the other Jordanians. So they're like second class citizens, anyone who's not part of the Hashemite tribe, family, and so on. So point being is, this was the creation of what led to the modern state of Israel. You had a neighboring nation that they created this chaotic, unstable rule of Jordan, even though today Jordan is one of the more stable countries in the area. But again, it's because of major influence and support by the United States, by England, and other countries that are kind of holding them up, and because they're more moderate. And so we're trying to, keep them as an ally within a very unstable region, right? But in which case, so that leads to the modern state of Israel. That was what was decided. Jews started to flood here in mass. And then you had what was known as the Zionist movement, which again was more started before that. Jews started to come here already in the 1800s. They started to build industries, and they start to develop electrical companies and so on and so forth, and bring in innovation. businesses and opportunities. And so many of the Arabs in the surrounding regions who came from Lebanon, came from Syria, came from Iraq, they came from even from Africa, from Egypt and so on. They all fled or flooded into this area because of trying to get a new life and make money from these Jewish entrepreneurs, that they heard Jews have money, they're wealthy, this and that, So they came here with aspirations for a new life, for new everything, right? And usually these are the ones who are, as far as the tribal control and position in the country, as far as your social status, they're the ones who are usually at the lower end of the social totem pole. So in other words, we got the lower class of the Arab world that fled in here, and then these were the ones who, in time, thanks to Yasser Arafat, who adopted and chose to take this identity as Palestinian. He's the one who gave birth to the Palestinian people. And today we talk about the Palestinians. It's not the Arabs anymore, it's the Palestinians. So, and again, I'm not going to get too deep into this. If you'd like, you can watch the episode that we did about the truth about Palestine. This is kind of just regurgitating some of what is found in the documentation within the book that Lars Anderson wrote, The Truth About Palestine, if you want to get into a deeper dive. But the point is, Yasser Arafat himself made the quote and claimed that he is the father of the Palestinian people, that they did not have an identity. I'm going to give them an identity. And up until today, this is what is being propagated by the media and by politicians worldwide. The only one that I've seen lately who is willing to combat a lot of these lies is actually Robert Kennedy Jr. He's the one that has been bold to fight back and to push back on a lot of these lies. Mainly the one about how Israel's the aggressor, Israel's done bad, Israel this, Israel that. And he just went straight out and just gave all these facts. And I take my hat off to him, because that was a really bold move to do, and gave a lot of good historic factual background to a lot of this lying that is being promoted on social media, on news networks, and so on. And so I noticed that he made some really good statements. Gingrich, I can't say his name right, sorry. I know at the time also made some very powerful statements, and specifically about this myth of the Palestinian people. So he was one of the few people also to just really hone in on the identity of the Palestinian people and say, this is just nonsense. We need to stop promoting this and perpetuating these lies, because if we want to get to an actual solution between the Arabs living here and the Jewish people living here, then there has to be a negotiation and discussions based off of historic facts in reality, not myths and fairy tales. And this is the bottom line, because if you don't understand this and all this backdrop that I just gave you, then you're just getting sucked into this never-ending wormhole of lies and misinformation, and you don't know who's telling the truth, and you get and of course your heartstrings are going to pull towards the weaker one in this conflict, the one who doesn't have jets and tanks and a strong IDF to defend them and all this stuff, right? And I get it if this is where you're coming from. I get it if that's how you're seeing this, because you see me as the bad guy. You see me as this American speaking white dude who came from North America. And that's true. My family comes from North America, but technically my ancestry comes from Europe. But that is not where all Jews come from. Most of the Jews in the world and most of the Jews who live in Israel are actually Middle Eastern Jews. Their origins, when you look up Ashkenazi, okay, Ashkenazi, that term, it doesn't, we use it today to label the European Jews, but actually Ashkenazi, if you take a DNA test, it's just giving you a labeling for globally Jews from all over the world. So if you're a Jew from Yemen, okay, or a Jew from Iraq, or a Jew from Morocco, these are all Muslim Arab countries, Middle Eastern countries. These are dark-skinned people. When you come from these countries, you're going to be labeled as Ashkenazi in your DNA test, right? So just to be clear, the term Ashkenazi, and to say that the state of Israel is colonized by European Jews is a blatant lie. Jews lived here since the Roman dispersion of Jews that kicked most of us out from this land. Jews continuously had a presence in this land throughout the Christian period, which is known as the Byzantine period, during the Arab period, and the Islamic rulings, during the Crusades, and on and on and on. The Ottoman period and the British period that ruled here from 1917 till 1948. So Jews have continuously lived here up until the founding or the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948. So up until then, Jews have always lived here. Jews have always lived in the Middle East, not just in Europe, not just in North America and Canada or wherever. Jews lived in Asia. Did you know that? That you have Chinese Jews. Yeah. African Jews that are fully black people, like any black people living in Africa. Okay, they have the exact same skin tones and very similar ethnic looks, but they're slightly different from their other African tribal community. That and only if you're an African who lives in Africa will you be able to tell those small nuances and ethnic visual differences and so on. But as far as skin color and so on, they're as African as you would think. And the reason why I'm saying black, just to be clear, you have white Africans, okay, living in South Africa. They're African, but they're as white as they come, right? Because their origins of where they originated before colonializing South Africa is from Holland and Dutch and whatever origins, right? So any case, and not all Africans look exactly the same. I've spent many times in different parts of Africa, and I've learned a lot and been very surprised to see the many different ethnicities within the so-called black colored skin, black of different Africans. And all that to say, you have Asian Jews, you have African Jews, you have European Jews, you have Arab Jews, you have Jews from all over the world. And so the majority of the Jews who live here today, just to bring us to modern day times, they are basically Arab Jews. They speak Arabic. Most of them today don't. From my age and down, they've stopped speaking Arabic at home. Not as much as they used to when they came originally from Egypt, from Syria, from Iraq, from all these countries. And to say that Israel's an apartheid, to say that Israel's a colonial state, this is absolute madness and ignorance of the facts on the ground. I grew up in the Middle East, and I am just as much as a Middle Easterner as anyone else. I didn't grow up in North America. I happen to have American parents. I happen to be able to speak an American version of English with an American accent, and so on. But just like the South Africans who have a white skin background doesn't mean they're not African. Just because I'm white skinned doesn't mean I'm not Middle Eastern. And I wasn't born and raised in the Middle East. Hopefully that makes sense for some of you who, again, I've noticed a lot in the West, like your understanding and grasp of geography is pretty poor, and history is pretty poor and pretty sad. You don't even know your own history, let alone someone else's. And so all that to say that when you think that you can critique me, and when you think that you can tell us what we are and what we're not, is absolute madness. Absolute madness. The people that you should be listening to on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is people like former British colonial Richard Kemp. He is a world-renowned expert on war, especially war in the Middle East, because he has led the British forces in Afghanistan. So that was one of his former military positions. And so he understands the Middle East better than most of his fellow countrymen in England who didn't grow up in the Middle East. They understand the European culture. They can maybe speak French and Italian or whatever, but they don't necessarily speak Arabic or Pashto or whatever thing. Whatever is spoken here in the Middle East and all the different dialects, and they're way different than European dialects and languages and so on, and influences. So, being that he served in a very high military position, his understanding of the battlefield and battlefield conduct of European standard or British standard in warfare is his background, his experience. Mr. Richard Kemp, embedded with the IDF, joined and observed and watched how we conducted our war in Gaza in 2009 and 2014 and so on. And his assessment was that during the operations in those times that the civilian casualties to the terrorist casualties that were killed by the IDF operations were an average of 1-to-1 ratio, one civilian to one combatant ratio, and that is taking the Hamas's numbers for the statistics. That was an extremely low average, especially that under his experience of operating in the Afghanistan campaign, that the West has been fighting the war against terrorism, it was 4 civilians to 1 combatant. Just think about that for a minute. The civilian casualties of war of Western nations, United States, England, Sweden, all these countries that have been fighting the war against terror in Afghanistan and Iraq, it's 4-to-1. The IDF's number is 1-to-1. If you don't understand math, I'll explain it to you. Basically, it's 4 times multiplication, 4 times the amount of casualties of civilians under the Allies, okay, if you will, the modern day Allies on the war against terror in Afghanistan. The civilian casualties in this campaign that we're fighting right now in Gaza, by the way, is still 1-to-1. It's exactly as what we had in 2019 and in 2014 and in 2009. We also had a small, short campaign in 2019. But in all of these campaigns, okay, in all these wars that we have fought in Gaza, and it's not comparable. You can't compare apples and oranges, because that's what people are doing when they're trying to compare Afghanistan and Iraq to the campaign that Israel is fighting right now in Gaza. They are not comparable. Not the urban structure, not the tunnel warfare, nothing. The only thing that comes comparable, the only thing that comes close, is what John Spencer points out in his research. He pointed out that in the campaign that the war that was fought in I forget the country that he was talking about. I'll bring it up here. Thank you. The battle in 1945. The only thing that comes close is actually in World War II, the Battle of Manila. So the Battle of Manila, okay, is the only thing that comes comparable, because the ones that you went to go fight against were embedded within a civilian population, and they fought in tunnel warfare, and so on and so on. So he gives a lot of comparisons. I'll make sure to put his Newsweek article where he lays it all out. And so John Spencer, again, you want to talk about people who are worthy, who are trustworthy resources, who are worth their salt when it comes to discussing these issues. He's one of them. I've had him on an episode here with the podcast. I had him here not because he's pro-Israel, not because he's a Zionist, not because of any of those things. I had him on because when I did my research and I wanted to see who knows what they're talking about that can actually discuss my experience and my fighting in Gaza and explain it to the masses so that you guys can understand. So he laid it out to those who listen to that episode, and I highly recommend that you listen to that episode because it's one of the best facts of fact talking on this topic that I've had of all my guests. So John Spencer, who is the head of the urban warfare studies at the West Point. Thank you, man. My mind today. Sorry. So he's out of West Point is where he does his studies and where he gets all of his information and breaks it down for you. And if you're not going to listen to him, and you're not going to listen to Richard Kemp, and if you're not going to listen to who else do we have? Lord Andrew Roberts, okay, another individual that I've mentioned multiple times, because again, these are people that are neutral to me. I'm picking people who are neutral, who don't have a bias that I'm aware of, and are just giving you facts. So Lord Andrew Roberts is a war historian, and when I spoke to John Spencer, he pointed out, he said, actually, he's much more of an authority than John, because he's studied way more historical wars and whatever. And so, point being is, these are the experts, and these are the people. Have you noticed that these are the people that are not being heard? The only exception that I can tell, and then Douglas Murray as a reporter, okay, again, not a Zionist, not any of these things. You know, Douglas Murray, if you want to hear true reporting about this war from a reporter and someone who is physically come and witnessed and been an eyewitness and seen and observed and has a better grip and understanding of this conflict, and not an armchair expert, so to speak, because this is the thing that is, like I said, this is what's been frustrating me. I come back from fighting, from risking my life to avoid civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip. Wow. I've had booby traps, snipers, IEDs, multiple mass casualty incidences happening within my very near vicinity. In other words, I walked through hell and back with my men, okay? We risked our lives. We laid our lives down for the state of Israel first and foremost, for the security of our people first and foremost. But in addition, based off of our ethics of war, our ethics, not the world's ethics, I don't need your moral standard to follow, because my moral standard is actually higher than yours, with all due respect to whoever you think you are. If you've fought in a war, if you've experienced war, and if you've observed how we fight war, you would agree with what I just said there 100%. The ethics of war that we have are extremely high. And that is exactly why the IDF, in my opinion, is being very successful and also has a high protection rate. In other words, technically low casualty to our forces in anything comparable. Although there isn't anything on this in modern warfare that is comparable, the casualties are extremely low. My personal opinion, that when you follow the conduct of Jewish ethics, biblical Jewish ethics that are founded on biblical ethics, which is what the IDF follows. Okay, and it's called Ruach Tzal. You can Google it if you like. Ruach Tzal. That is the 10 commandments of every war fighter that fights in the IDF. That is what we swear by when we go to war. Those codes of ethics are based on biblical ethics. And in my personal opinion, when you follow those, you have supernatural protection from God. It protects you in your attempt to fight a moral battle against your enemies. According to retired Colonel Richard Kemp, he said, "No army in the world acts with as much discretion and great care as the IDF in order to minimize damage. The US and the UK are careful, but not as much as Israel." Again, I didn't say it. This is what someone outside of the IDF, outside of Israel, who has observed the way we operate. And again, anyone who has had any of the Western nations who have had training drills with us, who have who have trained with us, mainly because you don't operate with us, but we have lots of trying to think of the word, but there's lots of crossover of training, of drills, and what have you. If it's Air Force, if it's ground forces, and I've been a part of some of that. I've been a part of joint training drills with the Marines and other units, and when sharing our stories and our military and our code and ethics and all this, this is the thing that is surprising to every one of those units that I've ever had contact with, and friends who are veterans of different countries of the military. When I sit down and I discuss and share those stories, they're shocked. They're like, we would never do that. We would never do that. How you operate and all that, that's too high of a risk to our forces, and we just wouldn't take those risks. But that's what Israel does. We go over and beyond. Now, here's the other thing that really, really is irritating to me, and I'm going to come to a close here with these last final thoughts. Right now, as of this recording, we have had one of the most historic, most heroic hostage rescue missions in the history of the world. In the history of the world, there's no hostage rescue mission, and I've studied most of them. Okay, because this is, to me, one of the areas of great interest to me personally as a warfighter, is how to perform the most successful hostage rescue. So out of my personal small amateur research, I can tell you there's no hostage rescue mission as heroic. They all are heroic, but what I'm saying is that the operators put themselves in such a high risk no other operator in the world has ever done. Went into the heart of the enemy, surrounded by over 1,000 armed combatants, rescued 4 hostages, eliminated over 200 of these terrorists who engaged with the hostage rescue units, and those units were able to eliminate over 200 of those terrorists. And I've had personal contact and discussions with one of those operators who was part of that mission, okay, embedded in that unit, which is one of the best units in the world, bar none, when it comes to the most complex and unique operations for Tier 1 units. And in that operation, one of the team leaders fell in combat. And I also happen to know his personal family. All that to say, you need to understand, like, I'm coming from firsthand stories and or experience, and that's what I'm sharing. I'm not sharing what he said, she said. I'm not sharing my opinion, although I am sharing my opinion, but I'm not giving my opinion, meaning, this is my opinion about, the war in Ukraine. I'm not giving my opinion on that because I wasn't there, right? So that's what I'm saying. It's like so my opinion is coming from firsthand experience, firsthand knowledge, firsthand contact and stories and shared information with the people that were there, that were part of these missions and or etc. Right? So that's not been talked about. That was not talked about. You didn't hear this on the media. What you heard is that the IDF went in, rescued 4 hostages, and that the result was over 250 Palestinians were killed. Civilians, poor people, right? Nobody told you that they were armed. Nobody told you that it was like the Black Hawk Down, Mogadishu, swarming like bees, armed combatants that were coming to kill you, and to kill you as you're trying to get these hostages out. It was heroic. It was a book and a movie should be done about it, right? If you want one. Okay, 13 hours is like nothing next to this. And with huge respects to the men who fought in Benghazi and did some very heroic stuff. But what I'm saying is, based on my knowledge from all of those missions and all of those operations, this one takes the cake, 100%. There's no question about it in my mind. But nobody talked about it. Nobody made it into a, wow, those guys are heroes, except for the Israelis. We're the only ones who were like, wow, okay? And me, having the privilege to talk to some of those guys and to get firsthand information and be like, dude, I can't even understand how did you guys, like, what? Of course, they can't give you all the secret information, so neither I or anybody else, except for the people that were there, have the full picture. But just getting a veiled picture of what happened, it's incredible, beyond incredible. And now here's the other thing. So that happened, and again, there was huge excitement here in Israel. Of course, there was a huge joy and whatnot. But then, just recently, we retrieved 6 bodies. Okay. Now, where did these bodies get retrieved from? And this is, again, depending on who you're listening to, this has been getting, as far as the impact of this, has been spinning out of control here in Israel. We ended up with 6 bodies, one of them an American citizen, and the United States president made some comments about it. And in fact, one of his main comments that he made, United States President Biden, what he said, I almost said Obama, Biden, right? So what President Biden said was that the Prime Minister of Israel hasn't been doing enough to end this war, and unfortunately, this is part of the results of this ongoing war, is these 6 hostages, the deaths of these 6 hostages. So somehow this becomes the Prime Minister's fault. The terrorists broke into Israel 11 months ago. The terrorists kidnapped our citizens, that they have been torturing them, and that they've been holding them in the most horrible conditions, and that moments before the IDF got to their final location, which was where? All eyes on what? Rafah. All eyes on Rafah, right? You guys remember that? All eyes on Rafah. When me and my friends were going in, risking our lives to go after the terrorists, to eliminate the terrorist infrastructure, risking our lives, having huge casualties, mass casualty days. It was horrible. It was hell. And we were held back, and we were the ones who had more casualties, more losses, and more lost opportunities to rescue our hostages, because the United States government put pressure on us not to continue those operations. I was there. We had momentum, just like the beginning of the war. We had momentum, and we were stopped. Come December, screeching halt. Come I forget all the dates now, but I just remember I remember there were actual periods where you knew, wow, everything's coming to a halt. Why? And that's what frustrated me as being one of those war fighters, as being one of those on the ground, risking their lives, their family left at home with maybe daddy's not coming home, all for what? Because of political pressure, not letting me do my job? What? Because the world doesn't trust me as a warfighter to do it ethically? I just gave you all the facts and information as how we are a quarter of the of the casualties of war for the West campaigns against terrorists, but apparently we're not good enough to do, like we're not trustworthy. How is that possible? How is that possible that I'm not trustworthy as a warfighter when my numbers are 4 times better than yours? That's a fact. These are facts that we're talking about here. It's not my opinion. It's not Doron Keidar's opinion. It's not because I'm Israeli. It's none of that. So for all of the Candace Owens out there, okay, for all the Pierce Morgans out there, for all the Yahoos out there, okay, and now recently, depending when you see this, not as recently, but you have this, was it Dan Bilzerian or whatever his name is, that bozo, who went through Buds twice, and that's his claim to fame, right? He never became a Navy SEAL. He never accomplished anything noteworthy in his life. He's surrounded by prostitutes daily because he has to pay women to sleep with him. That's this is the low life of a person. If you're following him and if you're listening to his opinion about this war, this is who you're talking. This is who's thinks he has a leg to stand on. Okay, the only thing he did honorably, if that's even factual and truthful, but based on what I'm able to dig up from fellow SEALs, actual SEALs that actually served who didn't just pass Buds, but they served in a SEAL team. They got accepted into a team. They became teammates. They operated. They were full-fledged SEALs, real SEALs, and fought in real wars. These guys say, okay, so he went through Buds twice. His attitude and character was crap, and we didn't accept him, and that's the bottom line. And the only thing that they say that they give him credit is that he finished his contract with the Navy, doing whatever crap job that he had to do. Now, that is about anything I'm willing to give a bozo like this. Okay? I agree with that. Great. So you finished your if that's true. Sure. But what did you do with your life after the Navy? All you did is whine about how they didn't let you. That officer had it out for me, right? In other words, excuses. And people like me and people like those SEALs and Special Forces operators, there's nothing more irritating than listening to the guy whine about how they got singled out in selection. If you don't pass selection, if it's the Green Berets, if it's the Rangers, if it's the SEALs, or if it's Delta, or what have you, okay, or any of our Special Forces units, okay, the Matkal, Shaldag, what have you, Shayetet. If you don't pass selection, it's not the people around you that's the problem. It's you're the problem. You either don't fit, not necessarily a problem. You just don't fit. You can be a great guy, but you just don't fit what we're looking for as a teammate, as someone that we're willing to have our back as we're risking our lives downrange. That's the bottom line. It's not personal. It's not, towards you. And the fact of the matter is, that's what he did. He made it personal. He goes and makes a living off of telling the whole world, and people listen to him. And this is what irritates me. He's gotten on some of the largest platforms to spew his crud and to talk about his, whatever. And then he adds on to it now his hatred of Israel and the Jewish people and our war here for our homeland, for our safety. This dude has never fought in a war. This dude doesn't know what war is. He has no place to discuss war. Definitely not with me. and definitely not with any of my fellow teammates and any of the wonderful souls, saints, that I've had the privilege to go shoulder to shoulder with. And in some cases, we've even had to bury some of our brothers. And that sucks. And we know what war is. We know the price of war. Don't tell us about the price of war. Don't preach to us about the price of war. We know full well the price against our families who have been raped, murdered, tortured, mutilated, etc. Which again, Candace mocks and says that's a total fabrication of the Zionist state, that those babies never got beheaded. Really? Well, from a guy who was there, from a guy who saw the Nova Festival after the horrors that the terrorists did to the people that were partying there, I'm an eyewitness. Candace, you can go eat your words and go crawl under the rock that you came out of. Just because she's black, just because she's attractive, doesn't mean that she's off limits for blowback from people like me. You better believe I'm calling you out. You are a sick, demented, poor person. This Dandel Zilbalian, whatever his name is. Also, you're a sick person. These are sick people who need help. And the fact that social media is prompting them up and pushing them forward in the algorithms, and they're crying about, oh, I'm going to get canceled. Oh, I'm going to get shut out. Yeah, with your millions of followers. It's people like me who are getting canceled, who are being shut down. I can't do a lot of things on social media anymore. I'm being canceled. I'm being shut down. I'm being shadow banned. All of those things are happening to me. And they're the ones saying that they can't speak the truth without being, that's nonsense. So just pay attention to those things. Warning, I'm telling you from one, like I said, who has been through this conflict, who has fought in this war, who has buried brothers, who has buried family members, and so on. I can tell you, war is hell. We don't want this war. We don't want to go into Gaza. We don't want to go back into Gaza for those of us who have been there. We're not interested in anything to do with Gaza. What we are interested in is for the safety and security of our people, of our families, and for our hostages to be returned home. That is not too much to request from any people in the world. And if you want to promote the lie of the so-called claim of Palestinians to this land, when really they are Arabs, most Arabs of the world originate from Arabia. Hello? If you want a little bit of a geography lesson there, okay? Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon. You have enough Arab countries to go back to. If it's not good for you here in Israel, and you don't like to live under the sovereignty and the blessing of Israel, you're welcome to go back home. That's my message to the Palestinians. And that's my message to the world who supports the Palestinians' claim from the river to the sea. You're not going to get more of an Arab conquest and control of this state as long as there are people like me to stand here on the defense of this land and our people. Because we made a promise to ourselves and to the world, never again. And never again means literally never again. Never again are Jews going to become victims of the hatred and bigotry of the world towards us. Never again are we going to allow ourselves to become victims of genocide and the eradication and the connection of us to our land and to our heritage. The deeper you dig in Israel, anywhere in the land of Israel, the more you're going to find our roots, our history, and that our claims go back to over 3,000 years. And if that's a problem to you, then you have a problem, not us. And this has nothing to do, and it's not equivalent and not similar to anything to do with any of the colonies of the West or the United States and the Indians because I know that's one of the claims that people say. So the Indians, should claim their land back. Has nothing to do with that. It's all the same, not at all equivalent. You don't compare apples and oranges. That's ignorance. You obviously don't realize the historic difference and the factual reality that the nations of the world agreed that Jews have a right to their homeland back in their actual homeland. And that the Arabs who are from Egypt or from wherever, they're welcome to go back to those countries if that's where they feel their heritage and their history is, and or they're welcome to live in the future state of Israel with full citizenship, full rights, full everything. And that's exactly what the Arabs of the state of Israel have. We even have Supreme Court lawyers who have been Muslim Arabs. Okay, we have Muslim Arabs who are in prominent positions both in military, police, and any part of the state of Israel, and in government. Okay, so they have governmental representation. It's actually the Christian Arabs who are the real minorities here, who are the real victims of being, bullied in the society of the region of the Middle East that is a brutal region. And unfortunately, they have been on the butt end of a lot of these conflicts between the Jewish people, if you will, and the Muslim Arab people that are fighting for control of this land. And it all has to do with Waqf and the Muslim Islamic not willing to accept a Jewish state in Waqf land, because the Muslims used to rule here. In their minds, Jews will never have a right to rule in what used to be Islamic land. And so those are people who are Islamists. They're not sharing the views of many, many Muslims around the world, many of them friends of mine even, that I know personally, who do not share those views and who are detesting their fellow Muslim brothers who share that view of extremism, of unwilling to have a real dialogue on land, rights, and so on. Because that's not what it's about. It's about extremism. Same with the far left. It's about extremism, extreme views, and taking extreme action to push forward those views, no matter the cost. That is what has led us to this conflict here right now that we have. It's a weak United States government. It's a president who is on vacation, okay, maybe hitting golf balls. I'm not even sure he can hit a golf ball, but let's just say he does. Sitting down on a beach, eating another ice cream. Whatever Mr. President Biden does on his vacation time, has the audacity to call out my prime minister and say that he's not doing enough, but you're the one on vacation, right? You're the one having leisure time while this conflict is increasing and coming to a head. And just to give you some context, on April 27th, Israel made an extraordinary offer. And Blinken said that the Palestinians or Hamas have an opportune, have a generous opportunity to take this generous offer. They rejected it. This is in April 27th. May 31st, Israel agreed to a U.S.-backed proposal. Again, denied. August 16th, a final bridge proposal. This is your time. This is it. All right. Egypt and all that. Everybody got involved. Okay. Not direct negotiations, but through proxies and whatnot. Denied. August 19th, Blinken, Israel accepted the deal. Hamas now needs to agree. So on August 19th, he's like, come on, guys. I put pressure on Israel. I've got them to agree to your deals, to your extreme deals for a ceasefire, etc. Rejected. The final the final negotiation was in August 28th, where the deputy CIA director came out and said Israel shows seriousness in negotiations. Now Hamas should do the same. Rejected. This was just a few days ago from today, from this recording. So again, my question is, everybody says that Israel should do something different. That, Here's my question to you. What should we do different? What is it that we're doing that you would have done and have done in a similar situation? That's exactly it. Neither America, neither Canada, neither England, neither France, or any of these countries who have had the audacity to lecture us on what we should do differently and what we should do better, none of you have been in this circumstance. None of you. And none of you have brought to the table an actual solution, just criticism, just spreading more hatred towards Jews. And hence, we live in a day and age where the rise of anti-Semitism is only growing and exploding. And that is a fact. So unless you know of a better option, a better deal, and you could give me an actual proposal, an actual serious, because you've actually thought this through and you know what you're talking about, then it's not comparable. You can't compare this conflict with any other war, and you can't compare it to anything. That is the bottom line. That is the bottom line. Quit critiquing us, again, unless you have something valuable to say and something valuable to bring to the table. This is something that I've seen, by the way, and this is somebody that I actually do give respect to, is Piers Morgan. Every person that he's brought on to his discussion, to his hard talk, or I guess it's called something else now, but in any case, the people I've seen him at least interviewed, and some of them, in my opinion, don't even have a place to give an opinion, like the comedian Basim, who said some of the most embarrassing things, honestly, just embarrassing for himself and for his Arab people that he's representing. He's an Egyptian comedian. If you don't know, you can look it up, the Piers Morgan and Basim discussions. And just to see how he was being so sarcastic and so unserious, but being asked serious questions. And that's something that I take my hat off to people like him, to Piers Morgan, that at least he's asked the host on his show, well, what would you do differently? Right? And they instead try to peddle the question back to him. It's like throw the ball back in his court, because they know they don't have an answer. They know they don't have actual solid something valuable to bring to the table. Just criticism, just more criticism. That's all, right? And so this is my message. If you sat through this whole nearly hour and a half here of this particular podcast and this episode, if you made this far and listened to my ramblings, hopefully you've walked away with a little bit of context, a little bit of history and backdrop to this conflict, and firsthand expression of what I want to say about this, how I feel. And this is just coming from somebody who was there. This is just coming from somebody who's been laying his life down on the line. Not me as like I'm some kind of hero. Again, I'm one of the thousands of the soldiers who have been called up. And I just had the privilege to be with my fellow brothers and teammates, and to go into Gaza and to risk our lives to defend our country. And I can tell you from my firsthand experience, there's not been any genocide in Gaza from us. There's been no attempts to murder, kill, torture, hurt any innocent Gaza civilians. We have been targeting and focusing our efforts on the terrorists and taking extreme measures to help the civilians in Gaza, which we don't owe them, and we don't have to do anything, as in humanitarian aid, as in electricity, as in running water. All of that, by the way, comes from Israel, from the international community as well. But we're the ones that logistically bring it into the Gaza Strip and try to get it to the civilians. And unfortunately, it's the terrorists that get their hands on it, and the black market thugs from the Gazans who get their hands on it. And they're the ones who have full control. Again, I hate to keep using this imagery, but it's anyone who's seen Black Hawk Down and has seen those terrorists getting a hold of the food from the United Nations, the rice bags and all that, and mowing down people to keep them away from that very important food because they were starving. The Somalians were starving. And it was a very dire time for the Somalians. The terrorists took advantage of it. The terrorists took control. The terrorists inflicted their misery on the people. We're coming to set them free from that. We're coming to set our people free out of the hands of those same scumbags. That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. There is no alternative motives. There is no, there is no targeting or trying to eliminate or do away with any of the Palestinians. That is not what we're about. That has never been our motto as the IDF. And in fact, when anybody wants to use the term genocide, by the way, as a final note, and hopefully give you guys some more historic fact, that's actually a term coined by a Jew from Poland who was part of the trials, the Nazi trials. And in order to be able to try the Nazis, he actually had to come up with a term, a legal term, to try to express and explain what was it that the Nazis were doing. And the term that he coined and he created, he married together these Latin words. He created the term genocide, the ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people. So that is a term that was used exclusively for the Jewish people, and to use that against the Jewish people in an armed conflict, and to claim that one of the most moral militaries in the world would attempt to do that to another people. There's nothing more wrong. There's nothing more mute than trying to say something like that about us. You're dead wrong if you believe that. And you're welcome to come to Gaza. You know what? You're welcome to come to Gaza. How about that? You care so much about the conflict. You care so much about the Palestinians. I am welcoming you. Come to Gaza. In fact, I want you to go there. I want you to help them because they do need help. Good luck, although, doing that when having a barrel of a gun from a Hamas terrorist that is going to use you as a pawn and however they want to use you if you were to go and enter Gaza. But again, you're not going to believe me, obviously, if you have those views and you're so entrenched in your brainwashing from what you've seen on social media and all these lies that have reached you. And that's unfortunate. But what I will do for this episode is I will put resources for you. You're welcome to go click on those resources. It's going to be in the description below of this episode. And you're welcome to go look at the facts because the facts are there if you go and look in the right places. But if you listen to the facts, so-called facts coming from all these other sources that are propaganda and spinning the facts to push an agenda against Israel, then you're welcome to listen to those guys. In any which case, my advice, if again, you really care about this very much, like truly do care, besides running out into the streets and burning American flags and whatnot, then you're welcome to come here. You're welcome to come here and you're welcome to go and see it with your own eyes. And then I think your perspective will change very quickly because the reality on the ground is always going to be different than what you're going to see on the internet. And what I'm able to share with you, because I'm just sharing, I can't show it to you what I've actually experienced. So that's what I have to say on this podcast. Again, I hope this has been of help for many of you who have heard a lot of this nonsense online, a lot of these lies. And If you like this podcast, please support us on the Patreon. That is a huge help to us. It helps us to be able to create more content. It helps me to be able to pay people to do graphics and editing and all the different things that goes behind the scenes of creating these podcasts. And thank you guys again for listening. God bless you from Israel, and shalom.